I'm very passionate about all things health and nutrition related. Some, Curtis, might even refer to me as borderline obsessive, but that's okay. It all started back in October when I did a 30-day challenge called the Whole 30. I was really skeptical about this program, just like I'm sure some of you are right now. What's the catch? How much is it going to cost? Am I going to have to drink some juice or take some crazy supplement? I became even more skeptical when the program promised to change my life. Well, guess what? It did. So much, in fact, that my fiance, Jessie, and I have recently launched a blog around this very theme. We're challenging our friends and family to join us in doing another Whole 30 starting this August 1st. You see, since October, I have been just fascinated with the whole realm of health and nutrition and pursuing this idea of thriving as opposed to simply surviving. There's a difference and it's huge. And even though I've only been at this for less than a year, I feel as if I've learned some valuable lessons, one of which I'd like to share with you today, and that is that eating fat does not make you fat. I have one purpose today, and that is to simply do this: elicit some curiosity from the group here today and get you to think a little bit differently about the most demonized macronutrient out there in our diet today. So there's an interesting theory about fat, and it actually comes from the actual word. You see, fat itself is both an adjective and a noun. An author, Harvey Levenstein, says it perfectly. He says, "One wonders, what would have happened if the fats in our food and bloodstreams had been called by their scientific name, lipids? Would avoiding the off-putting term fat with its connotation of obesity have mitigated much of the fear of fats in food?" You see, since the 1960s, it's been gospel. Eating fat makes you fat. But is this true? In order to believe this, we have to understand some basic biological principles for what stores fat. Specifically, in the body, metabolically speaking, what is it that takes fat cells, puts them in your fat tissue, and makes you fatter? There's an answer to this, and it's called insulin. It's a hormone. It's secreted by your pancreas in varying degrees based on what you eat. Carbohydrates make you secrete the most amount of insulin, then protein, and fat actually doesn't make you secrete insulin at all. Insulin's primary job is to regulate the amount of blood sugar that you have in your body at any given point in time. Too much blood sugar can be very dangerous. Not enough blood sugar can also not be a good thing. It's insulin's job to make sure that we stay in that nice balance of homeostasis. So here's what happens. Glucose, blood sugar, goes into your blood. The pancreas secretes insulin, grabs that sugar out of the blood, and sticks it into either your muscles or your liver. The caveat here, though, is that we only have a finite amount of room to store glucose in the liver or the muscles. So the body only has one choice if we're tapped out in those two areas. It has to store it as fat. There's no other option. Let me give you an example. Say I took down an entire bag of M&Ms, which admittedly is my guilty pleasure. What would happen? Go into my stomach would begin digesting it, I'd break it down into glucose, and then it would go into my bloodstream. The pancreas would sense this, secrete the insulin to go grab that sugar out of my blood and stick it in my liver and muscles. But again, as I said, if we're tapped out there, the only thing it can do is store it as fat. How about this analogy? And I'm going to borrow this from a book called It Starts With Food. Let's say we open these windows behind me. What would happen? The Texas heat would start to come in. This room would undoubtedly get warmer. The thermostat over here would sense the rise in temperature, kick the AC on to then cool the room back down to make everything in balance. You see, this is exactly what the body does when glucose enters the bloodstream. And the point to all of this is that every single carbohydrate you eat, whether it's bread, pasta, banana, or a beer, all gets broken down into glucose in the body and gets put out into the blood as sugar. Insulin spikes, you know the rest of the story. You see, people are starting to figure this out. It's not the fat in the diet that causes the problems or causes the weight gain. It's the excessive or the beyond necessary amount of carbohydrate that actually causes the problem. People are taking it to extremes. They're on diets that are called the ketogenic diet, which essentially limits carbohydrate intake to less than 50 grams per day. For some context, 2 bananas puts you over that mark. Others are taking, in my opinion, which is a little bit more sensible approach, and following maybe a paleo diet, a Mediterranean diet, or a low glycemic index diet, all of which are higher in fat, lower in carbohydrate, and all of which promote weight loss and overall health. The Center for Disease Control has a program of studies called NHANES, which is an acronym. And within the NHANES database, there's an interesting statistic that I want to share. In 1971, the US obesity rate was 15%. Now we're at 36%. Throughout that same period of time, you see a clear indication that Americans' consumption of carbohydrates has gone up, while consumption of fat has gone down. Now, my boss is standing in the back, so I have to say I would never mistake correlation with causation being in revenue management. But from those trends, we can glean some insights from what's going on there. It's not the fat in the diet that causes the problem. I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, recommending a certain diet. I think everyone should go out and do their own research and do their own self-experimentation. I'm not saying that you should choose one thing over the other, but what I am saying is that we should all begin challenging conventional wisdom. We should all begin entertaining these ideas, these alternative hypotheses, such as fat doesn't make you fat. It would be pretty silly for us to all go out right now and buy a tub of lard and just start chowing down. Although I will say, 4 days out of the week, I put 3 tablespoons of butter in my coffee for breakfast. But I'll save that story for another speech. Thanks.